Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff, and today with us we have an extraordinary man. He's an icon in the field of cancer research, Sam Waxman. Sam, welcome to Successful Philanthropy. And Sam, you are such an extraordinary man. You are the founder of the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation. Can you tell our audience a little bit exactly about what you do and when you began?
My pleasure. Nice to be with you.
Well, thank you, Sam.
Really, we've known each other quite a while.
Yes, we have.
And I've watched what you're doing, and I respectfully think it's great.
Well, thank you.
I mean, philanthropy is an incredibly important part. And I often feel if you're doing philanthropy right, you get more back than what you give.
Always.
And that's a sense that most people should try to get. So I'm a doctor first. I'm a hematologist, oncologist, and my passion has always been hands-on patient care. And over the years, I also developed the expertise to do good science. So then I end up being a physician scientist. So
Yes.
I'm a healer, physician scientist, and the philanthropy comes in through the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation. And all three are related because people who you've given a healing situation when they're most in need, such as having a serious disease like cancer, they recognize how important it is to help you in what you're doing. And I've never had to ask, but when someone who I'd been treating found out about that, more often they would say to me, I didn't know you were a scientist, because I had them in separate places. And when they found that I was a scientist, they said, let me help you with your research, because that is a need for philanthropy.
Well, it makes so much more sense. If you're a scientist, you know exactly where to invest the money that you're raising, correct?
Exactly.
Yes, and I understand you've raised somewhere like about $100 million since your inception, which was 45 years ago.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, yes, we've funded over $100 million.
So you've raised much more.
We've raised much more.
Well, that's a lot
Right.
of money.
So what is the goal? You know, one has to be very humble in order to be a successful, let's just say, have the desire to have impact in cancer. So you start out as a scientist in your lab and you build an organization, and my lab grew up to be about 25 people at Mount Sinai. And so a lot of this is funded through competitive grants through the National Institutes of Health. But every time we wanted to make a new move into a different direction, there was foundation money to make that happen. Anytime we needed to collaborate with another scientist, there was foundation to let that happen. So the amount of funding that came in was incredibly fruitful to the idea of not just doing it with me and one or two people. Let's create collaborations between scientists.
Yes, and I've read that's one of your biggest interest is collaboration between different groups. So because you're very interested in finding cures, and by collaborating and working collectively, you
Exactly.
can always do more than just if you do it on
Right.
your own. And I think that's really admirable.
It's a model that has worked so well. I can sit here for days talking to you about all of the ongoing collaborative teams we've put together. But even as we speak, we have 60 scientists around the world working together as we speak.
And you fund them.
They have, what we do is kind of put the cement into bringing in these people.
To work together.
They have big labs, and they competitively compete for a Waxman grant, which requires them to find someone else to have a competitive program. And so it's sort of like bringing in two good companies, but you need something to draw them together. We have done this successfully. So we will, like just recently, we funded two groups in a form of cancer called Ewing sarcoma. which happens in kids and young adults. And so we had a collaboration a partnership really with the Alan B. Slifka Foundation. Alan was a wonderful man who actually lived in East Hampton, and the Israel Cancer Research Fund. And we put this out to competitive review. And we ended up funding 2 groups. Two of them happened to be at the Waxman Institute. One of them is at Mount Sinai, and the other one is at Seattle Children's Hospital. And now there's 2 teams that have got started. And it's not that common to get people together to study Ewing sarcoma. It's a rare cancer.
I think it's wonderful. Now, let's talk about some of your breakthroughs, because cancer is a big problem for most of the world, and everyone wants a breakthrough, and everyone wants to be able to live on and on forever without ever getting cancer. And I understand you've been involved in a number of breakthroughs, and can you tell us a little bit about exactly what some of those
I'll tell you
were?
I'll tell you about 2, but I wanted to make you realize that good science is always a breakthrough.
True.
So it's like saying, to measure what a breakthrough is would be different. If you're talking about a game changer where you're a Salk and you've gotten rid of polio, the closest thing that I've done, which I'm very, very proud of, was I had a concept early in my career that cancer cells were normal cells that went bad. 'Cause
Yes.
that's what happens. And why do they go bad? Generally, it's because the gene in a normal cell is broken in some way, and the information is distorted. So you get an unbalance, so that normal cell in a stepwise progression becomes cancerous. But I also have felt that if that happens, and you knew what made that happen, you could reverse the process and make a cancer cell behave normal. Now I was one of the first people to really demonstrate that in the lab in leukemia. And we started to do this with one of the first people to do something in China was my lab. And so we started a collaboration with a group in Shanghai on a particular form of acute leukemia that at that time was 95% fatal in 6 months.
And how did that work out?
So we identified what the mistake was, and it turned out to be a gene breakdown that didn't allow, you'll love this, vitamin A to function properly. There was a break in vitamin A metabolism. And once we discovered that, we started treating the patient with high doses of a vitamin A derivative, very similar to Accutane, which is used for acne. And
Yes.
every one of these patients went into complete remission.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now,
And as the way they went into complete remission was not by killing off the cancer cell, but the cancer cell was shown behave normally, carry out its function, and then die off just like a normal cell would. That wasn't enough. More collaboration with us in China realized that you needed another drug, and we found that a form of arsenic, which sounds again vitamin A and arsenic, but arsenic worked
Dangerous.
very well with this vitamin A derivative for very sound scientific reasons. And so the combination of arsenic and vitamin A derivative is called all-trans-retinoic acid. You can take this by pill. We have a 95% cure rate today without significant toxicity, without the bone marrow being wiped out. They're no longer, as best as I can tell, it's now been worldwide use for about 15 or 18 years. No one has reported recurrence, and no one's reported long-term side effects of the treatment.
well, that's
So that is, and it's something that I'm still working on in breast cancer right now, trying to make breast cancer, particularly the triple-negative breast cancer, more tameable, more responsive. So we are actually differentiating that type of cancer. And I'm hoping that I can get this done and make it a treatment.
so these are real breakthroughs.
Yes.
And for our audience, we are today with Sam Waxman, the founder of the Samuel Waxman Cancer Researcher. He is a doctor, he is a scientist, he is a philanthropist, he is an icon in the medical field. And Sam, one of the things you're known for is a very gentle approach to treatment of cancer, meaning that you don't administer drugs and a type of therapy that is debilitating. And I remember years ago, I think this is about 10 years ago, my father came to see you and he was suffering from lymphoma. He was elderly at that time. He was about 88, I want to say, and he came to you. He also went to many other research doctors, and he decided to work with you because he liked your approach. And one of the things that you said to him was, I can treat you, and you may not be cured 100%, but you will go on to live a very productive life. And you gave him a treatment that was so non-invasive, meaning he was able to live. I remember he would go for the treatment, for the chemo, in your office in New York City near Mount Sinai, and then he would come to my home and he would take a little rest, and then he would go back to his home on Long Island, and the next day at 9 o'clock in the morning, he loved to ballroom dance, and he and his girlfriend would go out ballroom dancing. And my dad ended up living till he was 94, died of a stroke, died of something completely different. But I feel you saved his life, and you did it in a way that enabled him to live this extraordinarily wonderful life. So I have to thank you. And so tell our audience a little bit about your non-invasive and your gentle approach to chemo, if that's the correct terminology.
Well, you know, Jean, every type of cancer is different. So one has to measure the risk and benefit of a treatment.
So you
and
personalize
so
the treatment.
when you have a person like your dad at that age group, you know clinically that they should not be given excessively difficult treatments because older people don't tolerate it as well. This is not Sam Waxman. This is not the gentle doctor. This is the knowledgeable doctor. And so my judgment at the time was that he had a very benign form of lymphoma. Now, that's not difficult to come up with because you look at the data and you looked at him, and one could reason then you got to try to maintain his well-being with at least toxic treatment and keep it going and see where it takes you. And in his case, it worked very well. Sometimes you start out that way and it becomes more aggressive. Then you have to become up the level. And then another measure of the person. I don't prejudice against a person because they're 88. You see how well he is, you get to learn about him. So it's really, so I want to go on record. We still have to treat cancer to win. And a lot of the treatments we still have toxic side effects. But in order to live, you have to have it. So don't quote me that there's a gentle way. I mean, the only gentle part is the idea of having your patient know you care about them. That's a good part of it. But on the other hand, the idea that if your dad needed more intense treatment, I would have given it. I would have given it to him if I felt he could handle it. And if he could do ballroom dancing, which I would have picked up very early, I certainly would have been on him to go into another level. So that's really what happened with your father.
Well, he did very well, and I remember he had no side effects, and I found that to be
a lot of treatments we have now.
Success story.
You know, Jean, in quick terms, we're treating cancer better than we have in your dad's time, much better. We're treating it more scientifically. We're using drugs that are targeted to spare the normal cell, at the same time hit more specifically the bad guy. Mm-hmm. Probably in the last 10 years, 50 drugs like that have come down the pike. So going into an oncologist's office for almost any form of cancer treatment is markedly different than it was before. And the data is also very encouraging. The success rate, the major forms of cancer of decreasing the mortality or increasing survival is increasing every year. So in breast cancer, it's gone up 20% or 30%. And so these numbers add up to these little breakthroughs we're talking about.
Yes, and I understand you've had a lot of success with treating women who have breast cancer. And here on Long Island, as our audience knows, we have a very, very high percentage of breast cancer, higher than national averages. And we're not sure why. It may be the chemicals in the ground. We just don't know. It might be the water, but Sam Waxman, you've done an extraordinarily good job treating breast cancer patients. I've had a few friends, they were older than I, but they had breast cancer. They went to you, and now they're living normal lives with no reoccurrences. And I have to thank you for that.
That's a good message to give to your audience. Breast cancer is a very treatable disease. Breast cancer, the earlier you pick it up, the quicker you make a diagnosis and remove the tumor. A proper treatment after that is a high risk, high reward of cure. And if a woman is now, unfortunately, has a recurrence, we can treat them much better and keep them well for a much longer period of time. And so it's still a most serious disease if it's in an advanced form. But the treatments, again, are more individualized, personalized. And so...
And that's what you do.
Well, that's what we all do.
Oh, that's...
I mean, you got people out here in Stony Brook that do it.
And they do a good job as well.
I don't want to say that I'm different than anyone else about when it comes to treatment. Every oncologist is taught to kind of follow a guide on how a person is evaluated. If it's a true, serious doc, there's a way to evaluate every woman with their breast cancer with a whole bunch of things and come up with, this is what you need. It's not just me. This is where we are, all over the world.
Yes,
I'm excited about that.
Approach is what you're talking about.
The whole field has moved forward. We're doing better work. One thing I want to get across to you, and I think your audience must know this. This is really, really what I'm working on, and that is, even though more people are being cured of cancer than before, the incidence of cancer is increasing all over the world.
And how can we reduce our chances of coming down with cancer?
So the major risk for cancer is aging. The longer you live, the better chance you have of getting cancer.
Meaning the body just simply breaks down, the cells break down.
Well, there's a bunch of things that change as you age. You can call them breaking down, but that whole process of aging the body loses its ability to developing cancer. Mm-hmm. And the links between the two have not been studied. Why is aging such an important risk factor for cancer? And that's what the foundation is doing. And we have set up an international program that is probably leading the world. And I want to find out, before I get done, how to prevent that, how to prevent the aging process from making cancer keep going up. And that's what your audience has to do. And I need help with that. I need a lot of people to jump on this because it's an underfunded question. And even in the last year, we worked out a partnership with the National Institutes of Health, and now we have a larger program with scientists from the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Aging, and the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation. We have to lobby in government to make this happen, because not only is aging the major cause of cancer, it's the major cause of Alzheimer's, it's the major cause of cardiovascular disease.
Most diseases.
And they're all related, but they're studied separately. Mm-hmm. So we are doing all our grants, someone working in aging, someone working in cancer, and together you have a better shot at closing the link between the two.
Well, what about diet and vitamins
all important.
And alcohol? And I've always heard that you should have a very low-fat diet, take your vitamins daily and not drink a lot of alcohol. Do you believe all of this?
I believe what is proven.
And is any of this proven
There
in
are
relation
definitely
to cancer?
there are definitely proven benefits. So much unproven stuff that I think you're torturing yourself needlessly. I mean, they're very straightforward. I'm a big person on moderation. I don't believe in not having something. I believe you have a moderate amount of this, a moderate amount of this. I mean, a part of life's enjoyment is to have a glass of wine, but not have a bottle of wine.
I agree.
Being lean and mean is a darn good thing. I say obesity is really treacherous. It causes inflammation. Inflammation is not a good thing. It leads to heart disease, leads to neurologic disease, and it leads to cancer. They're all associated with obesity. So staying slim, too much sugar, too much fat, we don't know what that means, but moderation is probably making more sense. Taking vitamins every day, there's no vitamin that has clearly been shown that prevents cancer. But you can get, vegetables and salad, and I don't object to anyone taking a simple multivitamin. But if someone's going to take a pound of vitamin C every day because they think that's going to prevent cancer, it
doesn't work.
No.
Finally, we have about 5 minutes
Yeah.
left, and I want to ask you about what you're doing during this pandemic. Have you put together a COVID-19 fund? And do you have opportunities for people to volunteer and work with you if they choose to volunteer? But I want to hear about COVID first.
Well, COVID-19 has really deterred cancer research. And
why is that? Because the money
labs
is going
were closed.
to COVID?
Labs were closed for 3 months all over the country. And so that when you shut down a lab, it's like it takes several, at least 6 or 7 weeks to get it up again, because a lot of these things you deal with, you have to regrow these things, and whether they're animals or whether they are things growing on a dish. So for example, my lab was closed for about 3 months at Mount Sinai, and then it took another month, so 4 months down. And that was pretty much the way it's been all over.
All over the
Happy
world,
to say
really.
we're all back. Everybody's
Good.
back in their labs throughout the country, and so that we're going full speed ahead. Treating patients with cancer has been a real careful, well orchestrated approach. One has to have really clear social distancing and
No question.
no question. Mount Sinai, I live 2 blocks from Mount Sinai, had as many, Mount Sinai system, which is not just Mount Sinai Hospital, there are about 10 hospitals. We had at our height 2,000 patients in the hospital with COVID-19, 2,000.
That's a lot of patients.
That was,
and
yes.
that puts
and
everyone
over
at risk, really.
And over 250 people on respirators on a given
goodness.
day. So you can imagine what that was like. I mean, I couldn't go there. I tried to, but I wasn't allowed. But basically, it was something that the people working in that, the docs and the techs and the nurses, were traumatized by.
No question about it. Our frontline
we must keep
workers-
in mind that they're not used to that kind of stress, and so the pain is still lingering.
Now you have an event coming up in November.
Right.
I know fundraising
Yeah.
is key to your
so that's
the
even
success
that's
of the
also
Waxman
another
Foundation.
huge challenge. The foundation is dependent on events for its budget. We have about a $5 million a year budget, which is significant. It all has to be raised.
So it's all privately funded, your foundation?
Yes, when I say private public, there are foundations that support
Yes.
us. But when you get right down to it, it's people. It's people,
So
people
important.
at a greater or lesser amount. Some people have been major donors, and others, we have a very active, gracious board that have been very, very generous. And then we have these events And having events at this time of the year has been very difficult.
Challenging.
There's something called virtual.
Yes.
So last year we had a 22nd annual gala. Jean, have you ever been to one?
I've been to many of your galas.
Yeah,
I don't think I was there last year because I think I was chairing something else. But we have about a minute left, so I want you to tell us about your upcoming gala and then how to give.
Is what I would like to call a lively virtual event, which is going to happen on November 19th. It's going to be a retrospective of 23 years of music that we've had, and we've had some great musicians.
Great performers.
Yeah, and we're going to include people who have been at these events from the beginning and have them have a shout out, intermingle, and we'll have some very surprising guests to do something live that's recorded. So we usually have about 1,000 people come.
I know, at the Armory in New York.
I'm hoping we'll have 5,000 people Zoom in.
Well, that would be great. And if we want to buy a ticket or donate to the Sam Waxman Foundation, how do we do that?
Yep. Well, you can do that to the Samuel Waxman Cancer Research Foundation at cancer.org. I think that's
wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Sam, for being with us. You've given us so much information, and I so admire all you do. And I am so personally grateful to you for the care you gave my dad. My family is very grateful. You are a hero in our eyes and in the eyes of many, many people. And so this concludes this episode of Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. I'll see you next week.